Welcome to Live from Mars, your go-to pop music podcast. My name is Alex. You may know me as Mars from TikTok, Instagram, wherever you have found me on the interweb. Thank you for joining us here. And today we are back with another new episode of the pod. It's been a crazy few weeks in the music industry with the release of Taylor Swift's 12th album, The Life of a Showgirl. Yesterday, all of the chart announcements came out where Taylor officially broke the record for the biggest first week debut in history, with over 4 million copies sold in the US, 5.5 million globally, and this beat the 10-year-long record held by Adele's 25. Throughout the last week and a half, there's been probably more discourse about an album than any other album since Taylor's last album, The Tortured Poets Department, came out, and that's just what you expect with a Taylor album these days. So I sent a little message in the Instagram broadcast channel Life on Mars to ask you guys to submit your burning Life of a Showgirl hot takes, burning questions, responses to my reviews of the album. So we're going to go through all of those today, and I figured what better than today to have a nice little full circle moment to welcome Steven Sullivan back to Live from Mars. We're going to go deep into all of the questions you guys submitted. I have them all up on the screen, and they're grouped into general themes between general impressions and reactions, reviewing the themes of the project, song and production opinions, lyrics, writing, and artistic growth topics, and then finally career context and future predictions of where Taylor will go next. So I have all of them that were submitted. Thank you to those of you who did submit these. These are awesome. And I'm excited to dive into this with Steven because he is a huge Swiftie. He is a really great fellow. And I'm really pumped to dive into this with Steven. He's a great content creator. He's a really big Swiftie. If you missed out on the episode from 2 weeks ago with Steven where we went through our predictions and bold hopes and fears for The Life of a Showgirl, definitely check that out because some of them have aged well and some of them have aged not so well. It's entertaining. But before I get into the meat of this week's episode and bring Steven in, if you're not already following and subscribed to Live from Mars on your favorite podcast provider, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're listening, please make sure you do so. And if you haven't already, submit a 5-star rating if you're feeling extra generous. That would mean the world to me. And in addition to the podcast and social media, my biggest content priority right now is Substack. And as I am now a full-time content creator, that is where a lot of my efforts are being focused right now. With Substack, it's vinylbymars.substack.com. There's a free side to Substack where all you have to do is sign up with your email address and you get access to the now spinning weekly newsletter. That comes out every single Friday where I go through the best of each week's New Music Friday releases, share what's happening in the music industry right now, and give you a little sneak peek into what's coming up next across all of my channels. But there's also the paid side of things, and for $5 a month, you get access to that now spinning newsletter, but you also get access to another weekly newsletter called Pop Pulse. That comes out every Tuesday. And that is essentially your breaking news info sheet of what's happening in the music industry right now. What are the biggest music news stories of the week so far? I'll give you a little bit of a look into what's coming out on Friday with new releases and what's coming out in the weeks to come. You also, as a paid subscriber, get access to my full-length album reviews. Those are written, and my full-length album reaction videos. So when I put them up on YouTube or put clips up on social media, they're obviously chopped down for copyright, but the full-length unedited version is always live exclusively on Substack. The one for The Life of a Showgirl is up. A lot of you seem to enjoy that one, so thank you for that. You also get access to the Discord channel, Life on Mars, so if there's anything that I just mentioned you're interested in, it would mean the world to me if you considered subscribing. Again, the link is vinylbymars.substack.com, but without any further ado, let's bring Steven in. Let's get into these hot takes because some of them are really fiery, and yeah, let's do it, shall we? Steven, welcome back to Live from Mars.
Thank you for having me back. Really excited to be here.
I'm thrilled to have you back. Before we sat down to do this, I went to go to Trader Joe's to get some groceries, and I was listening to the episode that we did 2 weeks ago to refresh my memory on what we talked about and what our big hopes and fears and predictions were for the album. And some of them aged really well, and others aged really terribly. I think your hope was just simply that you like the album. So let's go through a little checklist. Did you like the album?
I did. I'm really relieved to be. I felt a little insane that first day because it seemed like nobody liked the album. But I was like, okay, wait a second, guys. I'm having a good time. So I did. I like the album.
All right, good.
Thank goodness.
Your fear was that there was going to be deluxe editions, bonus tracks, additional versions of the album coming out, which did and didn't happen.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that now?
I think I feel okay because the reason that was my big fear was because she outright said there's only 12 songs. And I didn't want there to then be more songs and people were like, oh, Taylor Swift lied to us. And so anything she says now has no value. And there were only 12 songs. She did stripped back acoustic versions of them and released those, but it didn't change her sentiment that there were only 12 songs.
Yes.
So she still didn't make my biggest fear come true completely.
Yeah.
Thank
She
goodness.
unfortunately made mine. My hope didn't actually happen, and my fear did happen, which they're kind of intertwined. The hope was that we're going to get a really deep emphasis on the showgirl aspect of the title, and the fear was that the album was just going to be showgirly in its imagery, because she's done that with Midnights and other albums, in like 1989 Taylor's version, where the album's aesthetic and the photo shoot don't really match the actual music or the theme of what she's singing about. And in my opinion, that ended up happening where it doesn't really align, but I'm sure we'll get into that. But yeah, and then the big bold prediction was that she was going to beat Adele's record. Like, she's coming for the Adele record, and she did it.
Seeing the first news break that she might hit 4 million, I was like, there's no way. And then when the Billboard charts were delayed, I was like, oh
boy.
So she definitely hit it by the skin of her teeth. And they're trying to figure out whether or not they could publish the 4 million number.
Yep. It was like 4.002 million.
Yeah. Insane.
Crazy. It's insane. This needs to be taken seriously. And I know that so many people, especially the general public, are tired of hearing about every single record that Taylor Swift breaks with every release that happens and with everything she does. But like, this is the one to actually pay attention to, in my opinion, if you're going to pay attention and give her credit for one of them. Whether or not you agree with how she got to do it is a different story, but she did it. And that deserves to be taken seriously. And
I also, there is one thing that, because there was not to give credit to the comment section, oh God, but
why?
There was a comment that I repeatedly saw popping up from the clip we posted, or you posted last time, about her coming for Adele's record. I think it's awesome that the two best-selling single-week albums of all time are both from incredible female artists.
Yeah.
Because the number of people I saw commenting, like, why are we comparing the two women, whatever? It's because Adele had the record. She didn't have the female record. She didn't have any qualifiers. Adele had the record. And now Taylor is up there with Adele. And I think it is I love Adele.
Me too. Like, huge fan.
30, one of my favorite albums that has come out this decade.
Wow.
I think it is awesome that when you look at this list, number 1 and 2 are both awesome female artists. Like, this is
incredibly strong.
No shade to Adele.
None. And that is the comment that drives me crazy. Like you said, not like it was the female record. Taking gender out of the equation, it's still an accomplishment that someone outdid someone else. It happens to be that they're both women, but like, we can celebrate both of them like we're talking about. I think I saw earlier today that Adele still holds the record for like the biggest global amount in a first week.
I believe so,
in pure sales or something, or even total sales, whatever. It doesn't matter. The reality is, like, this is still a really, really big accomplishment. It's not pitting women against each other. It's just stating the facts. Those comments always drive me crazy, so I'm glad you mentioned it. But I'm glad that you're back. Today, we're going to go through, I had everybody submit on my Instagram broadcast channel their burning hot takes, their reactions to the album, their questions that they have for us about the album, what our responses to it are. I want to go through all of them. They're grouped into different segments. I'm prepared to stand my ground on my opinions on this album. I hope you are too, because some of these are fiery. These are fiery. So the first segment is general impressions and reactions. And we had a variety of responses. People saying that their hot take is that they liked the album, that they liked Canceled specifically, that the album is a 10 out of 10, and they really enjoyed it. Some people were very upset with my mixed review of the album, saying that I forced my harsh first response. So I want to use this opportunity to give you the chance to defend your view on the album, and then I'm going to respond to that with my view of the album, and then I'll give you a chance to rebut.
So I really did like the album. I already said it. I had a good time with it. I do think it was very different from what I expected it to be, but on first listen, my immediate reaction was, okay, I like this album. I like this album a lot. I don't think I like this album more, though, than Folklore, Evermore, Midnight's Tortured Poets. I was like, I like this album. I don't think I like it more than anything she's done this decade thus far, though. But as I've sat with it through the week, there were a lot of things, themes, ideas, lyrics, all of that. It takes time to pick these things apart. As I've spent more and more time with it, I like the album more and more every single day. And that is already coming from a spot where I liked it on day one. Like, I don't think any of the 12 tracks I like less than I did when I first heard them. Every single one has grown on me in some way in the last like week and a half of having the record.
Okay. Respect the take. I think that what you started with about like what you expected coming in is exactly why my disappointment is so tangible still. And I was listening back to the episode we did together where we were talking about our hopes for the album, how it was promised to be this banger, banger, banger of an album, 1989 Part 2, that returning to work with Max Martin and Shellback was going to usher in this return to this euphoric, undeniable smash hit pop era for Taylor, that it's a 12-song, cohesive statement. And parts of that are true, but the initial disappointment that I had is the mixed marketing of the album and the uneven quality, I'll say. So my take as of now, because I haven't really spoken about my thoughts on the album publicly since the first impression review that I dropped and the reactions, is that it's not as bad as I thought it was when it first happened and when I first listened to it, but it's still a bottom tier Taylor album for me. The first 4 songs on this album for me are really, really good. Like Fate of Ophelia, best lead single she's done, and I don't even know how long. Such a strong opener, arguably the best song on the album.
It's exciting to see the lead single be part of best song on the album conversations again.
Totally.
There's been a minute where like anti-hero people liked it, but most people were like, nah, the album tracks are better for Midnights. Willow,
Yep.
it was like, oh, the album tracks are better. We haven't
Yep.
had this lead single conversation since really Cardigan.
Yeah. So yeah, I think this is like a really, really strong choice. The music video is really great as well. And then Elizabeth Taylor, I loved. Opalite is the song that I've been returning to the most of any of them. It's the most lover-esque song, which is ironic coming from the guy who made an entire think piece video 2 years ago about why Lover is a bottom tier Taylor album, and that has evolved. And Father Figure is a really like classic Swiftian moment on the album. The songwriting, the role play, it feels those 4 play into the promise that she led into the album with mixing really clear, undeniable pop forward melodies with the writing stylings of Folklore and Evermore. For me, after track 4, there's a sharp change. There's a very, very sharp pivot in quality. To me, it's uneven. Eldest Daughter, to me, is one of the weakest track 5 she's ever done. Ruin the Friendship is great. I love that song, but I don't think it fits on this album thematically. Actually Romantic, I happen to like a lot. Wishlist and Honey, the trap-inspired production feels really dated to me. Wishlist lyrically is also clunky. What I think is funny, Canceled. I know you love Canceled, and someone else... the frantic 10_10s, their response was, I like Canceled. I love the production of Canceled. I'll leave it at that. But yeah, I think that my fears came true. That like this album had such high expectations because of the very little information we had coming into it. But that little information held a lot of potential. Whether it was going to lean into the Showgirl theme heavier, whether it was going to be more experimental or bigger, more maximalist pop productions, the songwriting would be more consistent, and it didn't land for me.
That's totally fair. This has been, I don't want to say like the fight I've been fighting all week, but it's been like,
It is.
It feels like people who have really, really strong opinions about the album negatively, they want to make the people who like it convince them that they shouldn't be liking it. And vice versa. The people who love it are trying to change people's minds who don't love it. And it's like, it's all good. This is what it is. This is what, when a person puts music, art, film, anything out into the world, it is going to be received in different ways by different people. I have had thoughts about Eldest Daughter. I really do think that the album would have benefited from Eldest Daughter and Ruin the Friendship being switched.
Yes.
Because I think Ruin the Friendship does a better job of kind of letting the listener know, okay, those first 4 songs have happened, and now we're moving into something a little bit different. Because the beginning of Ruin the Friendship does still feel kind of similar to the brightness of those first 4. Not that Father Figure is bright, but it ends.
No, but like it does have that, yeah.
And then by the end of Ruin the Friendship, with the like Whispered at the Grave and the reveal of what that story is actually sharing, I think that would transition into Eldest Daughter better than Eldest Daughter lends itself into Ruin the Friendship.
Yeah.
And then as for Canceled, I have seen the Canceled hate, but I feel about Canceled the way I felt about Vigilante shit when it first came out, in that I know it's kind of dumb, but there's just something about like that version. And I also do think it's ironic for Eldest Daughter to have Taylor being like, I'm not a bad bitch. And
Mm-hmm.
then a few tracks later, she's like, all my friends are canceled, and I'm like the baddest bitch there
Actually
is. This is my
Romantic,
underworld.
being so
And it's
savage
like,
on Actually Romantic too. It's a very
yeah,
strong contrast that thematically to me does not land at all.
it reminds me of how I said when Vigilante shit first came out. I remember one of the first things I ever said, because quoting the ancient texts here, before Vigilante shit got its sexy Eras Tour chair dance, people
Mm-hmm.
hated that song. When that song
Yeah.
first came out, before it was performed on the Eras Tour, it was not well received. They just thought it was an outlier on Midnights and not a good track. And then it got performed on the Eras Tour, and people were like, oh, I kind of see her vision for this. But I remember before it got its performance being like, Taylor Swift does a remarkably good job of writing a bad bitch anthem for someone who's afraid to tell someone that they just cut them in line in the grocery store. Like that's the sentiment that I get from it, and I very strongly identify with that. And it's like, yeah, none of my friends are canceled, but I'll be damned if my windows aren't down, rolled down in the car, and I'm screaming about liking my friends cloaked in Gucci and in Scandal. Like that's what it brings to the table for me. And it's like I recognize that there's almost I don't want to. I feel like the word embarrassing is too strong for it, but like a silliness to it, where like
I
if
was
you
gonna
try
say
to take
cringe.
it, yeah, I guess like if you try to take it in full earnest at face value, of course you're gonna be like, oh my god, I can't believe she said that. But I don't think songs the likes of Cancelled or Vigilante shit are any more cringy than songs the likes of This Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things or I Did Something Bad. I just think because they're not
Totally.
dressed up in the Reputation aesthetic, they stick out a little bit more than those songs did on the Reputation album.
I was going to make a point about what you just said, but I realized that someone commented exactly what I want to discuss. So
Okay.
at Spence B02 said, we missed the point. It's about the life, not the show of a showgirl. Hence some of the production choices. The writing is very witty. And this section is about meanings and themes behind the life of a showgirl, taking the theme of being a showgirl and how the album successfully or unsuccessfully executed it. So what is your take on that? Was this album marketed correctly to be the life of a showgirl? And how do you feel about people making the distinction between the emphasis on the word life or the emphasis on the word showgirl?
I think had we been having this conversation after one listen of the album, I would be like, she totally missed the mark. I don't know where the showgirl aesthetic came from for this. But as I've kind of sat with it, I have two different groups of six for the track list that exist in my mind. I have The Fate of Ophelia, Elizabeth Taylor, Opalite, Wishlist, Wood, and Honey. All of these kind of, to their core, they
Romantic.
are romantic in some way. They are about the love that is existing off the stage and in the life related to like the love that our showgirl is experiencing. And then I have Father Figure, Eldest Daughter, Ruin the Friendship, Actually Romantic, Cancelled, and The Life of a Showgirl, which all kind of delve into these kind of more taboo aspects of what it means to live the life of a showgirl, the negotiation aspect of Father Figure, and the having to take what you've learned and potentially use it against the people who taught it to you. The Eldest Daughter, I think, pairs really nicely with Ruin the Friendship, where Ruin the Friendship is like, I have to spend the rest of my life wondering what could have been when I was younger and how my life could look differently had I just done one thing different. Paired with Eldest Daughter being like, but I also have to acknowledge that like I don't need to forever wonder about the past. I can look at the Ferris wheels and all that stuff right now and acknowledge that it's still beautiful today. Just because 16-year-old me refused to acknowledge that I wanted this life doesn't mean that I can't live it today. And then the kind of actually romantic, canceled, celebrity culture, feuds, beef, gossip, drama, all that stuff, and the life of a showgirl. The not dressing it up as like, yeah, I was told when I was younger that this was going to be hard, but now that I'm doing it, it's actually a lot of fun. But rather saying like, I was told when I was younger this is going to be hard, and it is hard, but I don't love it any less because of that. And so like those kind of two distinctions in my mind have really helped me wrap my head around what she is saying here. Because I don't think it's all about her life off the stage. I just don't think she can write 12 songs about her experience standing on stage performing the Eras tour. That would be a really boring album. And as awesome as it would have been to get one, I Can Do It With a Broken Heart esque Eras Tour specific song on here. Coming to terms with its absence has made it a lot easier to like kind of meet Taylor where she was at with this and what her idea for it was. And the more time I spend with it, the better my understanding of what she was going for here becomes.
Wow, I'm so excited to continue talking about this. The entire time you were talking, I'm just taking it all in, and I'm like, oh my God, there's such a good conversation about to happen. Okay, I really like your idea of splitting the two mentalities, because I actually Noah.c underscore said the album wasn't branded accordingly. It's Showgirl, yet half or more of the songs are more, quote, lover girl. And that's exactly how I'm feeling about this album, that it wasn't branded accordingly. Your distinction does help it make sense, but it's kind of more lover part two than I would argue showgirly. I would continue that by saying that I Can Do With a Broken Heart on Tortured Poets is more showgirl than probably any song on The Life of a Showgirl, just in terms of how on the nose it is. But that's what a lot of people would say. And I want to challenge that because, like you said, if every song on this album was so on the nose about I am Taylor Swift, I'm on the biggest tour of all time, and this is what my life is like, that would get a little old. But I do think she missed the mark on the showgirl perspective of it. And it's more than just a song about being Taylor Swift. To me, it was more about what it means to be a showgirl, what production choices, what drives a showgirl. And we actually talked about this in our last conversation about bringing in elements of traditional vintage showgirl with Broadway tones and jazz and a little more theatrical production, a little more theatrical inclusion of interludes maybe. And I thought, because I came up with this idea, I personally think it was a great one, where my concept for the album, because an issue that I have with this album, with Midnight's also, is she promises this concept album, but it's not really a concept when you actually dive into it. And I respect the fact that you're looking at it by breaking it into two halves, like you said, but I don't think the listener should have to do that work. If the album is called Life of a Showgirl, I would want it to be easy enough on the ears on a first listen that you know that this is about the life of a showgirl, rather than having to be a really deep fan and know how to separate the two out. I understand for you and I, because we're so deep into the lore of it, that we're able to do it, but for like your average Joe Schmo who's tuning in whenever a new album comes out and only when a new album comes out, they probably think it missed the mark on that. So the concept that I was talking about last week was you get to the very last song on this album, The Life of a Showgirl with Sabrina, and the way that the song ends when you have the actual audio from closing night of the Eras Tour come into the end. I love that choice. That to me is the tiniest little seed of what this album could have been. And it's not until the last moment you realize what it could have been. That what I was looking for with this concept piece about the life behind the Eras Tour, maybe have an intro song and have interludes throughout the album, where the intro, you start to hear an audience kind of clap and roar and scream, waiting for the first moment of the show. Or you have backstage someone counting, like on I Can Do It With a Broken Heart. All right, 3, 2, 1, like, let's go. And then I thought it'd be really cool of an interlude moment when like a song that directly reflects how high stakes, how quickly paced an interlude is on the tour, to match that energy with a song that's like high BPM, fast paced. The way that I Can Do With a Broken Heart is when it's like, I'm a real tough kid, I can handle my shit. And like you feel the intensity of the moment brewing. Have a song about that, like reflecting how fast she has to change into the next era, and maybe have some actual audio of the backstage monitors and the tour managers like in her in-ear saying like, okay, 30 seconds, counting down, stuff like that, to just make it feel like you're within this little universe while you're listening to the 41 minutes of this album. That to me would have made such a difference, that when you take the reality of the album not fully living up to those expectations, and granted, that's a concept that I just came up with, but taking it as is, The Life of a Showgirl with that title, it did disappoint me that the concept didn't get fleshed out further and that the sonics of the album didn't tap into that perspective more. Seth made a good point last time of people saying, well, it's about her life. It's the life of a showgirl and she's the showgirl. And Seth said, that's every album. That's every Taylor album. So what does the showgirl have to do with it? I just said a lot. So
one of the first things you said about like not having to distill the album into the two parts, I do want to make clear, like when I'm doing that to like help wrap my head around it, I do think the 6 love songs are just as important to the story she was looking to tell here as the 6 like showgirl business woman songs. And I don't think I would remove or add any tracks based on that distinction. I think I might just mess with the track list a little bit. Like, I think The Fate of Ophelia as an opener is perfect, and I think The Life of a Showgirl as a closer is perfect. But I think kind of that journey, obviously the specifics of it aren't here, but I do think that journey could be a little bit more brought out if the songs were just in a bit of a different order.
Yeah.
Because they are kind of almost chunked. You get our first three, and they're all love songs, and then we get Father Figure, Eldest Daughter, and Ruin the Friendship, and they're all kind of about what you give up and the way your life changes as you grow and everything like that. And then actually Romantic is kind of an outlier, stranded on an island by itself, followed by two more love songs, followed by Canceled, followed by another love song, followed by The Life of a Showgirl. And it's like there's moments early in the album where they're very clumped thematically, and then moments near the end of the album where we're really bouncing back and forth from song to song thematically.
Yeah.
And I think either one had been settled on, I think could have helped the flow of the album a little bit.
Definitely.
But I don't think that any specific songs actually missed the mark. And I do think it's really another thing that you said that was so interesting is wanting a little bit more of this experience that is so singular. Like,
yeah,
the only
she said it
person who
herself.
has-
I suffer
Yeah.
from what's the lyric on Eldest Daughter? I suffer from a terminal uniqueness.
Yeah.
Like,
And I
flesh
think
that
it's-
out.
It's so interesting to simultaneously want more of that, but we also got a sense of when I think about Elizabeth Taylor, Canceled, mentioning like the Cartier, these specific expensive restaurants, Portofino, the liking my friends cloaked in Gucci, these kind of unattainable wealth elements that we never have really heard Taylor sing about before that lend to the singularity of what she is experiencing. Like, I will never know what it's like to be surrounded by friends who are cloaked in Gucci. And even if she doesn't mean it literally, there are aspects of this that are so incredibly singular. And those aspects I have seen criticized in a lot of ways. Like the people talking about her, boasting her wealth in that way and talking about these things that no one can relate to. And so it's like, in theory, the idea of an album that delves into this experience that she is the only person to have ever had sounds so interesting. But I wonder what the reception of that would be if she were to release something that was so incredibly inaccessible to the general person's lived experience.
100%. And I think you're hitting on something really poignant that I would say this is probably her most unrelatable album she may have ever made. Like, maybe this in Reputation, but the idea of Reputation is less than the actuality of it. Like, the actuality of Reputation is that it's a love album about finding someone in the darkness, which people can relate to. Maybe not the specifics of that darkness, but like this album, like you just said, about all these unattainable brands and the mystique are relatively unrelatable for a lot of people listening to this album. But I think it really strikes an important note here that what has made Taylor Swift so successful for almost 20 years now, and I wrote an entire piece on Substack about it yesterday because it just like was really scratching it to my brain. I needed to flesh it out, that she's built her career on the fan artist connection and being the relatable, for classic trope, American Girl Next Door, where she is that young high school friend that you had that you've grown up with throughout the last 20 years. This is so not that because she has largely stepped out of the public spotlight, despite being the most famous person on the planet right now for the last few years, we don't really know what's going on in her life outside of rumors, and she doesn't really do interviews. The album, to me, didn't reveal so much about what's actually been going on in her life since what happened in the Tortured Poets department. And when she's stepped behind the spotlight and hasn't really been giving interviews since 2019 Lover era, you rely on the music to tell you what's going on in her life. And I feel like she really did that with Tortured Poets. But with this album, you don't really know so much. Like, you don't know those specific stories about like how on Tortured Poets, how Maddie was so high that he ate a bar of chocolate, and they talked about Charlie Puth being an underrated artist. Like, there's very specific details where you actually get to know what it was like and the heartbreak that she felt with that record. Whereas this album, yes, it's love oriented and it's optimistic, but that detailed storytelling, which you get in moments, I feel like I walked away with this album feeling like I know less about Taylor Swift than ever. Does that make sense? I don't know if you feel similarly.
It does make sense. I'm just so intrigued by it because I don't really feel the same way. Like everything that you're saying to like explain what you're feeling makes complete sense. It just is completely unaligned with the feeling that I had listening to it.
Wow.
Because I think about coming off of the Tortured Poets department and the kind of nuggets that the Tortured Poets department gave us, The Alchemy and So High School, kind of like setting the stage for while she was in this darkness, there was a little opalite sky beginning to be crafted. It's hard because the Eras tour ended in December of last year, and we are getting this album now in October of this year. And of course, so much has happened to Taylor from December of last year to October of this year. I really think this album ends with the Eras tour. She's even talked about it, where there's a space between where you've written the music and where you actually release the music, and how it was hard for
Yes.
her to roll out Tortured Poets because she wasn't really tortured anymore. She had done
Right,
it, she had
right.
written it, she had genuinely felt that way,
But she had moved
wasn't
on.
there anymore. What makes it challenging is like her big thing with this rollout has been that emotionally she is still in the same place that she was when she wrote all this music. But obviously things have happened to her since she wrote it all. Like she got her masters back, they got engaged, the tour ended, all that stuff. But if we look at this as truly like capturing the part of the Eras tour that happened post Tortured Poets, but pre the end of the tour.
Yeah. Then that's this.
Yeah. And like I think covering all those boxes of feeling like she was saved, feeling like she wasn't going to find daylight because the sun was going to rise. She was going to find it because she was going to have to make it. Feeling the evolution from the prophecy on her knees, begging to the sky. And even within this album itself, back to back on Wishlist, she says she's wishing on falling stars. Cut to Wood, where she's like, I actually don't have to do anything. It happened. I don't have to knock on wood. There's nothing that I have to do. I don't have to be on my knees begging for the prophecy to be changed anymore. And so I think I'm dying to get music about the masters, which father figure kind of gave us. But like, I want to know about her life post Eras tour, but I don't think that's ever what she intended for this album to be.
I think the expectation was kind of there just because it's the most recent album. And with it being called The Life of a Showgirl and her saying it's about what it was like to be on the Eras tour, I think people just naturally assume it would go into more recent than that. But I saw a TikTok, I think yesterday, and I can't think of the creator's name, but if anyone does know it, shout her out. But it was someone who compared listening to Taylor albums these days to watching the new seasons of The Kardashians, where like the Kardashians are filming this stuff 6 months before it airs, that once it actually comes out, and because of social media, you already know what's happening before the episode airs to tell you about it. Like when Kim Kardashian got robbed in Paris, that was breaking news everywhere. That happened, I think, maybe October of that year. The episode about it didn't probably air until at least 6 to 12 months after that happened. You're kind of watching the episode to fill in the gaps and to get their actual perspective on it rather than the news clips. And that's kind of what this Taylor album is to me and what the more recent Taylor albums are like, because you knew going into this album that the tour ended, that she's met Travis Kelce, that they've been dating, that now they're engaged. But like if you're looking at it just in the timeline of post Tortured Poets Eras tour to ending of the Eras tour in December of last year, you kind of already knew about a lot of that stuff, and then you're listening to the album to get her perspective on it. I thought that was a really interesting comparison.
Yeah, and honestly, I think that also leans into the pivot that she has done in the way she releases her albums with no pre-release singles or anything, because I think about an alternate universe where The Fate of Ophelia came out in April. And then we found out in May that Taylor owned her masters. And then Opalite came out in late July with the official album announcement for it to come out in October. And then The Fate of Ophelia has done its thing, Opalite has done its thing, and then, I don't know, Elizabeth Taylor is pushed as the release single when it comes out in October. We'll never know what reception for that type of rollout could have looked like. But I do think this kind of keeping it all so close to her chest before everyone is able to hear it, it leads to these kind of explosive conversations, which granted, it seems like that's what she wants.
Yeah, she said it herself. She's like, if you're mentioning my name or the album name in this week, you're doing me a favor. I'm like,
yeah, and she's not wrong. But I think it leads to when people need to take it all in at once, and that anticipation for taking it in has been building for so long. Of course, these conversations are explosive because it's almost like a bomb is going off when the album comes out, because there's just so much dumped out all at once compared to if there hadn't been, okay, the Eras tour ended, and then 10 months later, here's an album about the Eras tour ending. If that gap had been bridged by, I exited the orange door of the Eras tour, and I stepped into the Showgirl era. she's been so constant, and I don't know how she's ever going to possibly untrain people for this
I know.
constantness. But it's like that dissonance there. I do wonder if using the full album drop all at once strategy for Showgirl ended up being to its detriment because of the break that it created between the Eras Tour ending and the album about the Eras Tour coming into the public.
Right. I think what a really interesting point you're getting to is, did this album come too soon or too late? At Skillio Slay wrote, I feel like the album needed at least another 6 months to be fully finished. I don't know if it's like needed more time to be finished, but the Swiftologist and Anthony Fantano talked about how artists are churning out new music so consistently without taking a real break that when Taylor used to take 2 years between albums, it gave the general public and fans enough time to settle back into a state of normalcy without the artist being the top of their attention. It gave the artist more time to evolve. And because so much music comes out so consistently now, it's missing that time period to let someone actually develop further. And they used Taylor as an example, and they used Tate McRae as an example, where, you know, Tit for Tat being this one-off single doing very well, Tate has been putting out an album like every single year for I don't even know how long now. And I would argue that it's stifling her growth, because if she took 2 years off and really got to like refind her sense of artistry, discover what she's into at this point in her life, at this age, rather than the inspiration she had 2 years ago that she just continues to make music from that Tate version, I think that that hurts an artist's sense of artistry. And I think Taylor is suffering from that same thing, that because she is so used to churning out new music so constantly. I mean, the girl's put out 9 albums in the last 5 years. I almost wonder if she took those 2 years off between albums again, because the reality is she's Taylor Swift. She can go away for 5 years and come back like Adele does and still drive insane demand. That's something that I feel like we're not getting to take advantage of because of this unrelenting pace.
Yeah. I do think it's interesting the way they have shifted kind of the view of the time between Taylor Swift albums, because it was 2-year gaps up until the longer gap between 1980 and Reputation. But then Reputation to Lover was not a full 2 years, was roughly the same gap that we had between Tortured Poets and The Life of a Showgirl. But there's something about having the re-recordings, having the Eras Tour, and having the general constant talking about her that makes these 1.5 year gaps feel smaller. They feel so much smaller than they did between Reputation and Lover. It felt like there was a lifetime between Reputation and Lover. And I do think that this Eras Tour documentary or docuseries that just got announced helped bring into focus for me a little bit more why Showgirl came so soon. And I think it's because she knows there's only so long that the Eras Tour can be relevant. And she's sitting on this album that she made, these songs that she made about her time on the Eras Tour. And I think she could have gone one of 2 ways. She could have released the documentary first and then had the documentary segue into the new album, or she could have released the new album, allowed The Life of a Showgirl to be part of the Eras Tour bubble, and then used the documentary to say, okay, and that chapter is closed. Based on the teaser that we got the other day, it feels like Showgirl was destined to be part of this Eras Tour history. Showgirl can't exist on its own. It's a product of the life on the Eras Tour.
I think that makes sense, but I do want to throw a potential caveat in there that the Life of a Showgirl album is largely time unspecific. Like, there isn't specific references in the writing, which is the next topic that we're going to get into, that anchor it to this specific, let's call it, she started seeing Travis, let's say July 23, I think it was, to December 24. So that like year and 5 month period, there isn't really references in the writing of the album that anchor these songs to the Eras Tour time period. That's where cynics and people who don't think that the concept was fleshed out or doesn't match the promise or what this time period reflected are gonna say, in terms of like it had to be released with the documentary, or like it had to be released with the Eras Tour kind of air happening, that this album really could be sitting in the waiting room for years from now and still be applicable, because it's not like these songs are about, you know, the first few moments, the first few months of Travis and Taylor dating.
I agree. You're right. But I could see Taylor wanting to move forward. It's like, how do you possibly move forward from the biggest tour in history if 2 years after the tour, after you've said goodbye and moved on, you are then putting out songs that you know are about while you were on that tour? even if they're not explicitly saying that way.
Right. I think that comes down to the question of, did she need to release an album right now? Did she
Yeah.
need to release these songs? And that takes us into the segment about songwriting, lyricism, artistic growth, production choices that a lot of people were chiming in at Masick _. Can we talk about the maturity level of some of these lyrics? At Chaco Bell with 1L _. Great username. While the album sounds okay, the lyrics are so bad and immature that they undermine the overall listening experience. At Iconic Official said, I think history is not going to look back fondly on this album. But then at Queen of Curiosity said, a brilliant album seemingly misunderstood by critics, references her previous discography, decades of popular music, musicals, literature, and culture. A lot to dive into there. During the Eras tour, she's been on this re-recording journey. A lot of people have noticed that a lot of these songs feel like they happened maybe because of the re-recording era, like Ruin the Friendship to me easily could have gone on Fearless. There are some very Reputation-esque songs here between Canceled and Elizabeth Taylor. You have Lover-esque songs that I think that where the Eras Tour impact is really seen is in the soundscape across the entire album. That this album is basically the Eras Tour version of a Taylor Swift album because she's pulling from so many different of her past selves to create this sound with, even if you want to take it to an extreme, like the Life of a Showgirl song with Sabrina having a little bit of a country influence, you could say that's her early work. That I like, and I think that taps into the concept in a way that my earlier concept of the concept worked. But the songwriting on this album really sent me into a little bit of a spiral. I have to be honest, because it's so uneven. Where the Fate of Ophelia to me is a great Taylor Swift song where it's mentioning, the Hamlet of it all and the Shakespeare influence, but it's also done in a really clever, witty way. Father Figure is so Swiftian, like the way that the bridge comes together and she's really taking it to the next level. Ruin the Friendship with that plot twist in the bridge. You have some really excellent writing here. But the issue with the writing that I don't like is just how cringe it is. And that is on Eldest Daughter. That is on Wishlist to me. That is on Wood and Actually Romantic a little bit. The first verse of Eldest Daughter being every internet slang word you can find feels so uncomfortable to listen to. It's like you're cringy elder millennial trying to be cool, which is exactly what she's saying that she's trying to be done with. And I think that's where it lost me. Some of these songs, while the melodies are great, like Wishlist is a great example. I really don't like the songwriting on this song. I really don't like the production, but the melodies really keep me going. I think that she sounds great. And I have to tell you, the acoustic version of the stripped back version that was on one of the deluxe CDs is so much better than the actual version. And I felt that way, not that Elizabeth Taylor on the album is bad at all. I think it's one of the best songs on the album, but that cabaret version is incredible.
It's incredible.
It's so good. So a point that at Tunes with Tay commented was a lot of people who don't like the album would enjoy most of the songs if the production were different. That is true there, but I can't excuse just the clunky songwriting. I just can't get past it. When she's proven that she can be really tactful and a skilled writer on Folklore, Evermore, even going back to her debut album, some of the writing on Taylor Swift debut is more mature than the writing on this album. And it's okay to have your funny, silly moment. I think Wood is hysterical. It's a crazy song, but I appreciate the fact that we have it.
Yeah.
But then, there are other moments that just don't land for me. So what are your thoughts on all of that?
I'm so intrigued that the conclusion you came to for Eldest Daughter, with the internet slang in the beginning being painful to listen to when she just said she wouldn't do that. Because you sit through all of that and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe Taylor Swift is singing these words right now. And then you get to the chorus where she's like, yeah, because all those things that I've tried so hard to be and project that I am and have successfully maybe convinced people that I am, in a lot of ways I'm not. To my core, I am still cat memes and baking bread. I think it achieves exactly what she set out to achieve with it, eliciting that feeling of oh my God, this is so cringy. For her to then have an entire chorus where she's like, yep, it's cringy. I'm not a bad bitch. I'm not a savage. And then I think that plays nicely into the bridge of that song with her being we try so hard to be all of these things so that we won't upset the people around us. I stand here, and granted, this is me completely extrapolating the lyrics, but I stand here and I look at the Ferris wheel with my friends, and they all think going on the Ferris wheel is lame. So I say I don't want to go on the Ferris wheel because I don't want them to think I'm lame. When deep down, I want to go on the Ferris wheel. And I think that is what Eldest Daughter is doing, is her being like, your life will flash before your eyes if you live it worrying about what you do that might make the person next to you cringe. Don't let that change who you are. And do I feel like that theme necessarily fits perfectly into the life of a showgirl?
Not at
First
all.
glance, maybe not. But I do think there is an element of not allowing what people think of you to change how you behave that's required if you want to do this thing. If you want to live this showgirl life, there is a massive element of knowing when criticism is worth taking and knowing when someone just thinks you're lame and knowing when someone is never going to like you. But it's kind of like what you said earlier. A lot of accessing those themes that she is going for requires
Work.
putting in work. And I honestly, I don't have a problem with an album requiring work to
I don't either.
understand it. Where this becomes an issue for Taylor specifically is because of how large the pool of people who listen to her is. The average listener does not want to put in work. They're not
And
going to put in
arguably,
work.
they're not going to, like you said, but arguably, the sound distinction between Tortured Poets and this album, Tortured Poets requires a fucking dictionary to get through.
Yeah.
Like, there are still words on Tortured Poets that I don't know what they mean. I still don't understand like half of the anthology. On Showgirl, because it's so accessible and a return to pop, it should be way easier. That you shouldn't need to do the work. That's like my only thing with what you're saying. It should be very clear cut that this is a successful concept then. And when it's not clear cut, that's where Midnight's faltered with me. Is that
I
to
do think
talk
it's a
about it as
little
13 Sleepless Nights, they didn't really come to that.
I will fully always believe that the 13 Sleepless Nights thing was to cover up how miserable she actually was in the moment of creating Midnights. It was to distill people, because she was releasing this album while the general public consensus was that she was still in a happy relationship.
Yep.
And if she had released Midnights under the notion that, like, yep, here's what's going on in my life right now, it would have been madness. So Midnights had to hide behind a concept.
But isn't that what she wants, do you think? Doesn't she want the madness? She wants the constant talk. That she literally said it this week. If you're talking about me, you're doing me a favor. Why not be honest and vulnerable?
I think to a degree, yes. If behind closed doors things were falling apart, I wouldn't blame her for not wanting that to be what the craziness was.
Something else that someone said is about Wood specifically. At Robert Rule said, I think Wood should be her next single and they should make a music video for it. And then at Charlie Guzman and Raid _ said Sabrina should be featured on Wood. That song is more into her style, sexy but funny and clever. A remix with her in the music video would be a hit. That leads me to two questions. The first of which is, do you think Wood is effective?
Yes, but I think it could be more effective.
I agree. I think it's effective in it just taking it as it is. I think it's hysterical and really just like on the nose writing. Not her best by any means, but like it's an enjoyable song. The part that is confusing to me about Wood is that I understand like the double wordplay with Wood itself, but you have the first verse and the first half of each chorus is about superstition. And then the second half of the chorus and then the second verse is really more about like what Wood is ultimately referencing, what saying it without saying it. That I almost wish they were two separate songs. But the bigger question that I have is these two people mentioning about Single Potential and Sabrina being featured on it. This song to me felt very much like Taylor trying to do Sabrina because Sabrina and her very sexified Lolita but 50s, 60s housewife aesthetic is working so well for her. It kind of felt like Taylor tapping into that a little bit, and I think it works way more for Sabrina. Did you pick up on that at all?
I do think if Sabrina had been featured on it, it would actually make the song work less, because I think having just the one perspective on the song is beneficial to it. The biggest thing I wish for it is that, because I agree that like you've got all of this really tight, the stepped on a crack, Penny, Black Cat, all that stuff, the picking the daisies. I almost wish she had kept the reveal of his love was the key that opened my thighs
to the end
for the last bit. Have something else in the place of thighs for the first two times that lyric is dropped.
The clean version says skies.
Yeah. So even if it was like first time, his love was the key that opened my eyes, love was the key that opened my skies, love was the key that opened my thighs. And then we end on the like, yeah, that's actually what this has been about the whole time.
Love that. I love that.
And I think it's interesting how Sabrina Carpenter, that kind of cheekiness has always been a part of her persona, whereas we are 20 years deep into Taylor. There's still this, like you said, America's sweetheart element that she will never shake. There will forever be a public association with that 16-year-old girl with her guitar and her curls up on stage. So I think it's really interesting when it's like, well, this isn't what Taylor does. This is what Sabrina does, whatever. It like she's trying to be like Sabrina. I'd be curious to see 10 years from now if Sabrina's doing something different.
Sure,
If
she will
it's
be.
like,
I hope she does.
well, this isn't what Sabrina does. Like how the point in which they enter the mainstream affects everything about conceptions about whatever they do for the rest of their career is so interesting to me. But all that to say, I don't think Sabrina would have benefited the song as a feature. I
think it's too on the nose. All right, that @low_Kenneth said, do you think this album will win any awards in the next award season? Do we think The Life of a Showgirl will be successful at the Grammys or not? This goes back to your hope.
This does go back.
Take it.
An album, I do think it will get an Album of the Year nomination. I think we're kind of at a point where it would take a lot for Taylor not to get one, which isn't right. That's not how it should be. Yeah. But there is an element of success that plays into at least the nominations. Not always the wins. But I could imagine a world where The Fate of Ophelia wins Song of the Year. We are so far out to be able to confidently say, like, yeah, it's a front runner. There is literally 10 months worth of music to be released that will be competing with it. But I feel much, much stronger about this than I did Fortnite.
It's tighter.
I don't feel stronger about it than I did All Too Well. It's going to be impossible to predict until we see the list of nominations.
Completely agree with you. I think that it's by far her best shot. If anything, I think that the album will get nominated. Just again, like there's so much music that's going to come out in the next 10 months of eligibility, but like when an album is the biggest selling album of all time, it's going to be nominated. Whether or not it should be is a completely different conversation. Again, has to do with what else is competing for it. If there are more worthy albums that are quality-wise better, I think they'll push The Life of a Showgirl for pop duo/group performance unless there's some remix of a single coming out of this, and that's about it. Maybe music video for Ophelia. Could see something there. I think
it is Taylor's best self-directed work, and it is easily top 3 music videos she has ever released.
And also now maybe this docuseries/concert film, best music film, you never know. Best packaging, who knows? But yeah, I think you nailed it. That like the main part of it is going to be Fate of Ophelia.
I've kind of hit a point. Midnight's won Album of the Year, and I have accepted that if Taylor Swift ever wins Album of the Year again, it won't be for at least 30 years. I think they knew that she was at 3. She was tied with legends for the most wins of all time. They had the opportunity, but now that she has that, I think getting a record is an easy pull for voters, for people who want the Grammys, for viewership, for all of that stuff, to utilize her getting that record.
The business behind it.
Yes. I think extending the record is something people would be a lot more hesitant to do.
Yeah, and I also think it needs to be an album worthy of that.
Exactly. Like, I think it's going to take a true universal slam dunk of an album for Taylor Swift to ever win Album of the Year again. And as much as I have enjoyed The Life of a Showgirl, I just don't think this is that album.
I agree with you that the next album to take it has to be one that is like an undeniable slam dunk.
The Midnight's win represented more than just Midnight's.
Totally. 100%. It reflected the status of Taylor Swift at that moment in time, being the biggest artist of our generation, without a doubt.
Exactly.
You got anything else you want to talk about?
I don't think so. I really enjoyed going back and forth talking about the album. And like getting your perspectives on things, because most of conversation right now, she's such a hot topic that you have the people who have actual valid, thoughtful criticism. And then you have the complete insane criticism. And that insane criticism washes over and leads to the people who like it putting these walls up where they don't want to let any criticism in, because it's a mix of these insane things and these grounded things. And so then you end up, no conversation is being had. You either like it or you don't, and that's where it ends. So it was really nice to be able to go back and forth. And like, that's exactly what it should be.
I so deeply value getting to have these kinds of conversations, because you don't have these with like your average friend next door. It's part of our livelihood and our passion to dissect it in all of this painstaking detail, that it makes it so enjoyable to hear that other perspective. And there's a really big difference between reading comments about someone telling you that your take is so harsh and picking out the tiniest little thing that you said and running a mile with it versus like having actual thoughtful conversation. And that's the beauty of art. Art is always going to be divisive. Art is always going to have people who love it and people who hate it and people who are in the middle of it. And when you can have a intellectual conversation about it, it is deeply refreshing. So I really appreciate you coming on, having this back and forth with me, agreeing, disagreeing, challenging. I think it's so important. A huge thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me back. It was awesome.
Of course. Feel free to plug yourself. Where can people find you if they're interested in getting more of you?
TikTok and Instagram are Steven Sully1, and then Twitter X is Steven Sully99 because the one was taken. Bummer.
But beautifully add up to keeping it 100.
Yeah, got to keep it 100 on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. The land, the sea, the sky.
Land, the sea, the sky.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. And
awesome.
It's all about Taylor Swift. So if you somehow made it to the end of this episode and don't like Taylor Swift,
good luck.
Probably just shouldn't seek it out.
Good luck. I love that. Awesome. Well, thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Live from Mars. I appreciate all of your comments. If you submitted one, really appreciate those of you who did, shouted you out. For everyone else who I didn't shout out, still appreciate your conversations. And they were woven into the fabric of ours. So deeply appreciated. Stay tuned for plenty of more Live from Mars coming in the weeks to come. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.
Bye, guys.